All right, today we're going to tackle the one thing that destroys more projects than any technical failure ever could. It's not about your scope, your schedule, or your cost. It's about that complex human ecosystem that surrounds every single project. Let's dive in. I want you to imagine this. You're managing a massive high-rise construction. Your blueprints? Flawless. The funding is totally secure. All your technical dashboards are green across the board. But then, bam, an injunction from a community group halts everything. A regulator throws in a new rule out of nowhere. Your sponsor, the one you counted on, unexpectedly pulls their funding. Suddenly, all those perfect plans are completely worthless. So what's the one thing that can derail it all? Well, the answer is a failure to see beyond those technical details. It's a condition we call technical myopia. It's this blind spot that makes project leaders focus so hard on the what that they completely forget about the who. And the remedy for this, our focus today, is mastering project stakeholder management. And listen, make no mistake, this is not a soft skill. It is the control system that literally gives your project permission to even exist. So let's frame this up. We're looking at the invisible project killer, the thing that operates way beyond the traditional constraints of scope, schedule, and cost. This is where the real risk is hiding. You see, we're not just talking about managing people here. Project stakeholder management is the strategic function that secures your project's social and political permission to exist. Think about that. Without that permission, your project is just a list of tasks that, honestly, nobody really wants or supports. It's the critical bridge between just doing the technical work and actually delivering business value. And this shows you how stakeholder management isn't some separate, isolated activity. It's the unifying thread that's woven through every single part of your project. I mean, think about it. Who defines your scope? Your stakeholders. Whose approvals dictate your schedule? Stakeholders. A disgruntled one is your biggest risk, guaranteed. So the focus has to shift from just managing tasks to actively engaging people, aligning their expectations with your project's goals. Okay, so let's break down the actual framework for figuring out who these people are and what they really want. This is the core logic of how you do engagement effectively. To really succeed, you have to analyze your stakeholders across three critical dimensions. First, power, their raw ability to stop your project cold. Then, interest, just how much do they care about the outcome? And finally, influence, their ability to change the minds of other stakeholders. You just can't treat them all the same. This table is basically your cheat sheet. You manage power, you inform interest, and you engage influence. So let's go back to our high-rise for a second. Here's exactly how that crisis played out, step by step. First, the project team totally neglected the local community. What happened next? That community organized online, creating massive political pressure. Then, the politicians, who were supportive before, they buckled and created new rules. And the result? A 4-month delay and costs that just went through the roof. This wasn't a technical failure. It was a catastrophic failure of stakeholder engagement. Okay, now that we see the stakes, let's explore the really complex dynamics at play. We're moving into the nuanced world of project players, the tough reality of politics, and the common pitfalls that even seasoned managers fall right into. A really common trap, especially on certification exams, is confusing these three roles. A stakeholder, well, that's the widest group. It's anyone impacted by your project. The customer is more specific. They're the one who's actually going to use the end product. But the sponsor? They are probably your most critical ally. They're the one with the money and the authority. You have to manage each one differently because confusing them is an absolute recipe for failure. And beyond those formal roles lies the most dangerous territory, the hidden dynamics. We're talking about the person with no official title who happens to have the CEO's ear, or the executives who are using your project as a pawn in their own little power struggle. A great project manager is always on the lookout for the alignment gap. That's the space where stakeholders' interests are in direct conflict. For instance, the finance department wants to slash your budget, but your customers are screaming for more features. Your job isn't to ignore this gap. It's to spot it and negotiate a consensus. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the theory. Now, let's get practical. This section is all about turning these concepts into strategies you can actually use, both for certification exams like the PMP and for your real-world projects. The PMP exam absolutely loves testing these concepts. So watch out for the misclassification trap, where a stakeholder's power level suddenly changes and you have to react. Always remember the proactive engagement principle. You never wait for problems to find you. And know your strategies. You can't solve a resistance problem with a mass email. That needs interactive, face-to-face engagement. And in the real world, this all comes down to making smart decisions. You need a tailored approach, formal communication for a regulator, but empathetic town halls for the community. When our high-rise project faced protests over noise, the smart move wasn't to just point to the permit. It was to negotiate, to find a compromise on work hours that closed that value gap and bought back stability for the project. So let's wrap this up with the core principles. Here's what you absolutely must take away from all this. Project success is ultimately defined by your stakeholders. Engagement is a continuous loop, not a one-and-done task. Always analyze power, interest, and influence. Know the crucial difference between your sponsor and your customer. Remember, your real job is to manage expectations. And above all else, being proactive is everything. So, we've established why stakeholder management is basically the lifeblood of any project. You get the roles, the dynamics, and the absolutely devastating cost of getting it wrong. You now know why you have to manage these relationships. But the next big question is, how? How do you find every single person who matters before one of them comes out of the shadows to blow up your project? Well, we'll tackle that in our next explainer.